Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before I get to our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Mikayla Custance on the podcast. She's a CPA figure competitor, as well as a fitness coach and owner of Michaela Fit. She's coming to us all the way from Vancouver now in Canada, but she's originally from British Columbia. But most importantly, she's our current guest. Mikayla, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So what is the weather like in Vancouver right now today?
It has been so off and on. I went for a walk this morning and it was sunny, and now it's clouded right over and it's kind of muggy. So it's literally all week. It's been like rain, sun, wake up in the morning, by the afternoon it changes. So that's Vancouver for you.
I always say though, I mean, it's like that's good. I mean, it's the same weather here, basically in Minnesota, and it's always good for people with our skin shade though, basically. Where I mean, we can go outside and not have to worry about getting burnt to an absolute crisp. That's a question that I'll ask you later on about the tan, because I've never been tan a day in my life. But before we get into that, why don't you just give us a little bit of a backstory about what inspired and what motivated you to get in shape and then to become a bodybuilder?
Well, I think it started since I was little. Like, I've always been a really active person. I grew up riding horses, and that's kind of how I got into this. I would compete in 3-day eventing, it's called. So we had three phases. We would do the dressage, we would do jumping, and then cross country. So I competed with that all through high school. And then when I was about 16, I ended up getting a personal trainer and going to the gym, and figured it would help me with my riding and nutrition and things. So from there, I actually got approached by a trainer saying, "Why don't you try competing?" And at the time, I had like no idea, that you could compete in fitness or anything. So I decided, why not? I really like competing, and I've got a competitive nature, and I love having a goal and something to work towards. So it was more curiosity that me started. At 17, I did my first show in Nanaimo, BC, and then since then, I took some time off, realizing I needed to put on a lot more muscle and more experience. So I just kept training, mostly because I loved it. And, I liked going to the gym. I loved lifting weights. I loved how I felt living a healthy lifestyle too. So from there, I stepped back on stage when I was 20, and I'm 27 now. And since then, you do a regional show and then you do well. So then you go to the provincials and then you go to nationals, and it just kind of kept evolving. And then people started asking me for help as well at the gym and advice. And I slowly just started taking on some clients. And in 2016, I started the Michaela Fit, and I've got a great group of clients that I just love training and seeing every day. And we've got our own little community that I love. And so it's really the lifestyle that I like. And again, I'm competitive. So I really enjoy having something to work towards. And yeah.
I'm curious because when you said that you went into weight training to get in better shape or to help with your horse riding, how would getting in better shape help with horse riding? Because when most people think about horse riders, they don't think about people that necessarily go to the gym. Just kind of like how we have a few golfers on here, and they're like, "Yeah, I'd go work out to be golf." And I was like, "Let's look at some of these golfers that compete in the pro shows." It's like most of them don't look like they've ever touched a weight. But how would weight training help you out with your horse riding?
I mean, it's definitely obviously a bit different. I trained a little differently when I started, when I was still riding, versus being a competitive bodybuilder. Just like everyone has their own goals, but it definitely helps. I mean, having your leg strength, having arm strength. The anytime you've got muscle, it's gonna benefit you, right? With strength, a lot of it too was core, helping your core. I mean, when you're riding, you've got to think about you're holding here, you've got no arms. It's your core that's holding you, and it's your legs that's holding you on. You've got to be able to move and go with the horse, and yeah, it helps.
Oh yeah, well, I was just gonna say that. I was just having you explain it, but yeah, I mean, just having just being in shape really does help you out with almost anything that you're trying to do in your life. But one of the questions that I love to ask all of our health and fitness guests is because I always say if you were to walk into a gym with 100 people, there's 100 ways as to how those people got into shape. Whether it comes down to their diet, their nutrition, how many reps they do, what exercises they do, so many little things add up to the overall package that people end up seeing. Was that a struggle for you when you were getting started to sort of figure out what worked best for your body? Because I always say, if you were to walk up to someone and say, "Hey, what did you train for this body part to get it to look like that?" What worked best for them 99% of the time is not going to work as good for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of it is, trial and error. Um, Learning what works for you, experimenting with your own body. Obviously, like anything, the more you do it, the more you experiment, the more The more you learn, the more you research helps you. I've been really lucky that when I started out, I had a lot of really great trainers and people to guide me and, try this and help you with advice and guiding me down the right path. But yeah, like if you're 5'5" and then you're someone else is 5'8", they're gonna have to train a little bit differently. Certain exercises aren't gonna work for you, right? So it really is knowing your own body and experimenting. Okay, this, my body responded well to bent over rows, or my body doesn't respond well to squats, so I gotta do more leg press. It really is trial and error. And again, the more you do it, you can kind of see different body types respond different ways. So sometimes people will ask me, how did you get your shoulders like this? And I'll go, well, for me, this is what worked. Now, for you, I can kind of tell you would probably benefit more by doing this kind of training or this kind of exercise, right? And having that eye. And I think that just comes with experiment.
I always compare it to like you're being like a mad scientist basically, where you're just trying to figure out what worked best for you. And yeah, everybody's different. Like I always say, I'm 6'3", so that leads me perfectly into my next question of, everyone always has that one body part when they get started that really, really takes off that they don't have to train as much. And everyone always has that one body part that just lags behind that they just have to train into overdrive to get it to catch up to everything else. What were those body parts for you? And I'll give you mine first though. For me, I mean my back, because I had jobs all throughout college of lifting and loading heavy packages into trucks, and you basically got a really defined back or you quit. Those are basically the two options that were laid out in front of you. But also being 6'3", I mean my legs, my lower body is just shot where I mean I have to train it into overdrive. I still have friends in the gym that make jokes at me, be like, hey, you plan on training legs anytime this year? And then I'll just oh my god, I train them twice a week, everyone. But it's just, yeah. And then like calves too, with my ultimate pet peeve, just because you're either born with them or you're not born with them. I mean, you can train them. I always said I can inject pure muscle into my calves and it wouldn't matter, they wouldn't grow an inch. But what were those body parts for you when you were getting started?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way, and I still, still have lagging body parts. No one's ever perfect, I don't think, or ever done. That's why it's called bodybuilding, not body built. You're never done, right? But for me, I tend to get top heavy very easily. My back responded very well too. My biceps, I don't train a lot. A lot of people have asked how I got my arms really big and defined, and honestly, I don't kill my biceps that
Give us a
much.
flex. Let's see your guns. Look at that. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, she clearly definitely works those things out. Are you kidding me? Yeah. But you don't even have to work those out as much. Come on, that's ridiculous.
But they respond really fast. I can get away with doing them just like once a week, couple bicep exercises. My back responded very fast. For me, it's more my bottom half as well. My legs, I'm still trying to kill them at the gym. It's still one of my weaknesses that I always want to bring out my calves, my hamstrings, and my glutes. I'm built very up and down. I'm not very curvy, so trying to build up my glutes more, bring out my hamstrings, bring that sweep in the quad. I'm always still focusing on that. Like I do legs 2 to 3 times a week. I was doing them almost every other day, trying to bring up my hamstrings leading into this show. And same with my lower abs. So, there's always those lagging body parts. So,
You poor soul having to do legs every other day. I mean, I hate like I mean, a day after leg workout, I'm just like, I don't even want to walk. I don't even want to do anything.
yeah.
I just want to lay in bed the whole day and just be like, okay, yeah, I'm taking a little bit of a breather. But yeah, I always love asking that question just because of the variety of answers that we get. And it's just so interesting to see, like how many people who their legs really take off, or how many people they got upper body or just back. And it's just so fascinating to hear. But I also love to ask every one of the bodybuilders that we have on, because I always say if you were to poll the general public, 95% of the people would not be able to get into the shape that is required to be able to go on a prep, just to be able to get on one. So, but when you go on a prep, I mean, you are notching things up to an extreme level when it comes to your diet, your nutrition. I mean, just you cannot miss a workout. Everything has to be timed and it has to be very scientific and basically perfect. What was that adjustment like for you the first time that you did a prep, and how has that evolved as your career has progressed?
Um, Yeah, it definitely was like when I first started, you don't really know what you're getting into, and you really can't explain it to the general public unless you've been in it. You really don't know what it really is like, the intensity in it. You know, it gets extreme. You start out, it's not too bad. You're eating pretty clean, you're feeling pretty good. And then, like, I'd say about the last 5 to 6 weeks, it really is going from lean to stage lean is very different. And it is hard, but I think as the more you do it, you kind of know what you're getting into, know what to expect, a little bit more about how your body responds to different foods and different trainings, so it can get a little bit easier that way. But I mean, no, it is a push, and I think that's what we love and what we hate about it is pushing yourself to that limit, and once it's done, seeing the accomplishment, right? And it's really cool to see. It's hard, but it's really cool to see your body, how it changes over those few weeks leading up to stage, and what your body's capable of. It's an interesting science for sure.
We know that you're a couple of days away from a show. I mean, obviously, we can tell just by looking at you. But what does that feel like when your body looks like that, and just when you just dieted down and you got to that super lean look? Does it just feel weird just seeing that, like, hey, this is me? Because you're so used to, or a lot of times people are so used to seeing their off season look, and then when they just get to that stage look, I mean, does it feel kind of alien where you're just like, I don't. This is just weird looking in the mirror.
Yeah, sometimes it is. It does get like that for sure, especially when you look back to where you started and started your prep and you're thinking, "Oh my god, I'm never gonna get there." Even a few weeks ago, you have up and down emotional where you wake up one day and you think, "Oh, I'm looking good. I'm right on track." And then, a few hours later, "Oh my god, my muscle's gone," or "I'm bloated," or "I'm holding water." Like it goes through these cycles. So sometimes I have days where I'm just like, I'm putting on a hoodie and I'm not looking at myself because, you know, sometimes I really like what I see and sometimes I really start to nitpick. So
No, I'm having one of those days right now. That's why I'm in a hoodie. That's why I'm in a hoodie right now. But no, I mean, I always just find fascinating for just what it's like to go through that. And like you said, the general public just doesn't understand what that's like unless they've gone through it themselves or they know someone that's going through it. But what would you say is probably the biggest nutritional change that you have to deal with every time you go on prep?
um, I don't know if it's necessarily change. It's more like the less what you eat, if that makes sense. So, I mean, you start out and like a lot of people say, well, chicken and yams and that kind of thing is all healthy. Which it is, and then once you go into contest prep, the yams and the portions of carbs get smaller. The proteins get leaner. You're cutting out fruit, even though, people say, well, fruit's healthy. Well, it is definitely healthy. And I'm not saying don't eat fruit, but once you're on contest prep, even that kind of stuff gets taken away. You're eating very lean, like green vegetables, which is like nothing. White fish, the leanest protein you can eat, flaxseed, udo's oil, the leanest fats you can have, bit of rice, bit of sweet potato. So it's more like the portions that get really smaller and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's one thing that I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize because I have had so many times where people have been on my show and they talk about how, like people like put an apple out in front of them. They're like, here, just eat an apple. It's healthy and it's good for you. And it's like, no, I have to eat something that's lean. I have to eat something that's rich in protein. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, it really, for a lot of people, they just don't get it to. And they're like, well, why are you doing that? But then they don't realize the results that, I mean, you see and just that feeling of what it's like to go on that stage. But also when it comes to prep, probably the number one thing that I would have never guessed in a million years is the hardest thing for all these competitors, or I should say the vast majority of the competitors that I have on the show would have never guessed in a million years. I don't think the general public would have ever guessed as well, is posing. It's one of those things where so many people just don't realize that it's hard for a lot of competitors. It's harder than your nutrition. It's harder than your working out. But now I like to compare it to, I mean, you can be a great driver. You can never be a perfect driver. You can be a great poser. You can never be a perfect poser. It's always ever evolving. What has your experience with posing been like?
Yeah, I mean, it's constantly just practicing. It's almost like a dance move, right? You just do your routine over and over and over again, and the more you do it, the more you can kind of connect with your body and realize, oh, I can move this muscle now, I can flare this muscle. Learning what angles work. A lot of it's about lighting, figuring out the stage where this light comes in so it accents your good points and hides your bad points. But yeah, it's another thing where you're constantly, trying to improve it, constantly making little tiny adjustments. The more people I learn from different posing coaches that have been able to tweak me a little bit, that's what we've been doing all week. Now that I got into Vancouver with my coach, he's been, just basically going over all my posing. It's been more than the training now. Is we've been posing 2 to 3 times a day, practicing holding it. Because you got to remember too, the judges are judging you, and you've got to keep flex the whole time. So it's like keeping it in a bicep curl or keeping it in a lat pull down. You've got to hold that. Everything's tight and everything's flexed. and you have to look relaxed doing it and graceful and moving, and transitions are important. So yeah, it's a huge part of it. You see some people and they've got amazing bodies, and it's like, damn it, they didn't showcase it as well as they could have on stage, unfortunately. And then there's some that are just like amazing stage presence and amazing posers, and they're able to just, the way they pose is they might have a little bit more flaws than you, but the way they showcase it is amazing. So yeah, it's almost an art too. It's a big part of it, and it's the last thing you really feel like doing after 3 hours of training and eating nothing, and you get home and it's like, now I got to put those damn heels on and practice posing for half an hour. But yeah.
I always say the biggest thing for me too has been I never realized that for a lot of these competitors, I mean, just the posing sessions that they go through for a lot of them are they get even more sore than their normal workouts, and then a lot of times after these shows they talk about how they're the most sore that they've ever been because I mean we had one guest on who her last name was Bull, so I mean she was one of the first people that got called out, so she had to wait. I think she said like 42 minutes like the whole time, and she had to be like flex the whole time, and the body is not designed to be like that. I mean you're not designed to be able to go for that long. But you brought up a topic that I love to talk about as well because you do have to wear heels, and I always say, don't these people have to go through enough already? And now you got to make them wear heels and walk up on stage. What is that like wearing those heels, and how much of more of a difficulty is that for you, or has it been something where you have been able to get very used to wearing those heels, where it just becomes second nature?
That's definitely my hardest part. I am a flip-flop, running shoes, I never wear heels type of girl. I think I've got like 2 pairs of heels in my closet that I wore like at a wedding or something once, and then I've got my stage heels. So, some girls, they wear their heels maybe at work or something, right? So they're used to it. For me, it's one thing where I have to practice. Like, that's my biggest thing, is the walk and getting used to the heels. And if I didn't have to wear my heels, my nerves would probably go down 80%, because they're very high, and we're always worried about, what if I trip, what if this, right? So no, for me it's definitely been something I had to work on, and I'm constantly practicing in them. But I've done it enough times too where I am now used to it, but that was definitely most challenging. I found practicing posing easier than practicing with my heels.
I always say the biggest regret that I've ever had in this podcast was I asked a lady from Texas if she'd ever worn high heels before, and then I got told. I mean, she said, "Child, please." I was born in high heels, and then I realized that any guest that I have from the southern United States, they basically born in high heels, so they have no problem from it at all. So that's why I ask all the people that are from the northern part or from Canada or from other countries about the heels problem. But yeah, that was the most interesting answer I ever got because she's basically like, "Yeah, I was born in heels. I have no difficulty at all with them." But I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I totally forgot to do my background on that, knowing if people from the South were really acclimated with heels. So yeah, I learned my mistake right there. But going back to posing, I always love to ask, what is your favorite pose to do, and what is your least favorite pose?
I always really like to do the back pose. I like, but partly because my back is one of my strong points, so I feel like I can really showcase that one. And I also really like doing the my when I come on and I do my side pose, which you can kind of play around with when you come on your presentation side pose. I like doing that one because you can kind of play around with it a little bit. Front pose for me is probably my hardest, because you can't actually see yourself, right? And shoulders have to be perfectly level, your lats have to be perfectly out. You can't see it, your stomach is tight enough, right? So that one's one where I've really had to practice without the mirror and have that feel of, is everything even? Is the shoulder up high enough? Is it out enough? So that one was one I always had to really practice.
Well, and I always say for me, the back pose would be my favorite as well, just because you can let your face down a little bit. You don't have to be smiling all the time. You can kind of just
You can
breathe a
breathe.
little bit. Yeah, you can breathe a little bit and just be like, oh God. Okay, now
Yeah.
pull it together. Now pull it together. Because believe it or not, one of the guests that I had on last week, and she was Australian, she talked about how she was told that she would have scored higher if she would have been able to keep smiling because she let her smiling down for about, I think it was like 15, 20 seconds where she was just so exhausted. But that's another thing too, where I say, I mean, for a lot of these people, the jaw muscles must be the thing that probably get the biggest workout during a lot of these posing sessions because to just keep that smile, I mean, I am not a smiling type person that much. So for me, that would be nearly impossible for me to do. So yeah, I can't imagine what that must be like. But we have a lot of NPC competitors on the show. Is the CPA, do they have different posing than the NPC, or are they basically the same type of poses?
They're the same now. The CPA and NPC are basically the same now.
Yeah, because we've had like some WBFF, like from Great Britain on, and their posing is just a tad bit different. And then the Aussies have just a slightly bit more. But yeah, it's good to know, yeah, that the Canadians have similar ones. I mean, the other Canadian guests that we've had on, I think they've said the same thing, but I just gotta make sure. But now, I mean, I'm one of the palest people you'll ever meet in your entire life. We went over this before. I mean, if I go out into the sun, I'm going to get burnt to an absolute crisp, even if I have an SPF of 1 million. It's my thick Norwegian skin that I basically have that, I mean, just guarantees a bad time out in the sun. I was at a Minnesota Twins baseball game a couple weeks ago, and I was only in the sun for about half an hour because I told my friends, I was like, we're getting shade seats. I'm not sitting anywhere else. We got to get seats in the shade. I was out there for about half an hour in the sun, and I'm still peeling off a little bit of skin right now to this day from getting burnt. So yeah, it's a nightmare, but I've never been tan a day in my life because I either get farmer's tan or just burnt to a crisp. Bodybuilders get to get tan. What is that feeling and what is that experience like for you when you get to put that tan on? Because we have so many guests come on and talk about how, you see muscles that you never even knew that you had. Everything really seems to pop out. What is that like for you?
Yeah. Oh, I'm the same. I'm Norwegian as well, Norwegian and Swede. So I've got the yeah. I always say if I ever go to Mexico, I like look like the Canadian flag because I'm like white on one side and then red on the other side. So I'm a little tanned right now, and that's because the last 2 weeks I do go to the tanning booths just to get a bit of a base down just before I get my spray tan. But it is like it's amazing how it does bring out the definition and everything for sure. um, that being said, I mean, it's not the most glamorous and fun part. I mean, you're
Yep. Oh yeah, we've
getting
heard
sprayed
we've heard
on.
stories about that, and I
Right?
was like, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it at first. I was like, you're lying. It's like, dude, don't make up these lies. But then like the second and third person said the same thing, and then I was like, oh crap, they're actually like telling the truth. Like that's like so like yeah, everyone, if you want to hear about that, it's one of those things too where I was just like, okay, these people go through all that, and then they have to do that too. It's like, come on, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, you're like in, I mean, you're basically in one of those little tents. You're fully naked. You've got someone spraying you with like a cold sprinkler. And then you got to stand there and have it dry for, which feels like forever. And then you got to try and not have it blotch off. And then they're touching you up. So the first few coats is actually not very fun. Once it's all like kind of settled in and dried and everything, then you're like, oh, it looks great. I've got this nice glow and it lasts a couple hours. But yeah, and this it smells weird because you got to remember too that when you put that tan on, it it plugs all your pores, right? So it's not like you really can sweat either. So yeah, it's not the most most glamorous thing. It's not like coming out of Mexico looking all beautifully sun kissed. It's yeah, they're spraying you down and then
I was gonna say when I first saw your profile, I was like, okay, she has to be Scandinavian because you are like one of the most Scandinavian looking people I've ever met in my entire life. So like when I was talking about being from Norway, I was like, she has to be from either like Norway or Sweden or something like that. But yeah, I get that all the time. I just have the brown hair. That's the only thing that might not look like I'm just absolutely. But yeah, that's from my mom's German and Irish side, I guess. But going back to the tanning, I always say too, you basically have to become a statue where, I mean, you can't sit on anything, you can't really stand up against anything. I mean, using the bathroom is a whole different conundrum that I just don't even want to get into. You have to bring your own bed sheets. I mean, it really just adds on to the list of basically all the things that these competitors have to go through just to be able to get on that stage. But the question that I ask every single guest in my podcast, whether they be my bands, my health and fitness guest, or any other type of guest that I have on, for my bands, I always like to ask, what is that feeling like for you when you get to step on stage and perform live in front of hundreds of thousands of people? But that also applies to the bodybuilders that I have on. What is that experience like for you when you get to step on stage and show off all that hard work that you've worked months upon months on?
yeah. I always say it's like, when you're at the gym, it's kind of like the tomboy side of me. I don't I have no makeup. You're in a t-shirt, you're sweating, you're grinding it out, which I absolutely love. And then you get to play dress up in a way, and you get to be glammed up, and you're getting your nails done, the tan, you get the hair, your makeup's all done. You're in this beautiful suit, and you get to come out, and it's almost like going into a fit beauty pageant, right? And you're on stage, and the lights and the pictures, and so it's kind of you get the best of both worlds, I like to put it, and being able to show off all your hard work. And it's just like that feeling of accomplishment that you made it on stage, which not everybody can say. There's a lot of people who want to be able to compete, and um, maybe they can't for financial reasons, or they're just not able to, or they find it too difficult. Maybe, not everybody can do this. So I find it very fortunate that I'm allowed to be on stage and can get to stage. So I just try and embrace every moment. Like this is what we've worked for the last, for me, it was 21-week prep. So for the last 21 weeks, like, this is my stage and my time. So I like to try and embrace it as much as I can.
Yeah, and that's 21 weeks. Oh my, that's like one of the longest ones that I've ever heard. That's just but that to be able to go through that, I mean, that just shows the perseverance and the determination that I mean these athletes have. But when you're on stage, does time really seem to speed up or does it seem to slow down?
It's a little bit both. Like when you first go on, I think it's that first kind of little stage jitters that you get when you first walk on, and time seems to go a little bit fast. And then once they start doing the call outs and they start moving you around and you're waiting to hear because you want to make top five. So after they judge you and they move you all backstage, you're waiting to hear your number. Are you going to make top five? And waiting for that, I think it's like probably maybe at 5 minutes. So when I watch a show, I'm like, it's not that long. When I'm on stage, it feels like an eternity, like waiting. I'm like waiting for them to decide, are you going to make this top five or not? Make it to finals. So yeah, there's times when it's like, oh, I went through my presentation round. I went so fast. And then it's like the judging comes in and you're like, oh my gosh, decide, decide, and it feels like they're taking forever.
Oh yeah,
So
I was gonna say if you're on there for like 40 minutes, yeah, that would probably
yeah.
seem for me like the
And
longest period of my entire life. Yeah, I can't
there is
imagine.
sometimes when they're okay, turn one more time, quarter turn one more time, and you're going, oh my god, really? Trying to hold it that long and keep it together, and sometimes that seems like forever. But it also depends on the show too. I've been on some shows where it's like they kind of have their idea already within them walking on, and they quarter turn you pretty fast. They've already got their idea, and sometimes it's a harder lineup, and they take a lot longer, and they have to look at you more than once. So yeah, it kind of goes show to show too.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't imagine what that must feel like, just the strain that that must put on. But now we go to a fun question. What is your go-to post-show meal?
Oh, it's always got to be something chocolatey. Chocolate's probably something chocolatey. The first thing, and then it's got to be meal wise is burger and fries. A good burger and fries, and then either something chocolate, either chocolate cookies or a chocolate cupcake or even a chocolate bar, something with chocolate.
I always say if I ever competed, I would just rent out a Five Guys afterwards and just be like, "Here's $1,000. I'm gonna,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be here basically till I either throw up, die, or pass out. But either way, I'm getting my money's worth." Yeah, that would be definitely my go-to. But now we go to a question that I think is probably the most important question out of all the ones that I asked, just because it is one of the two myths and stereotypes that I love to bust on this podcast. It's the first one, and it's a lot of people don't realize that that look that you guys put on stage, that is not a sustainable look. I mean, that's a look that you've worked, like you said, 21-week prep to be able to look like that. And it only lasts you for maybe even a day afterwards. And then you are going to eventually have to put on weight. And a lot of people don't realize that because I think they look at all these photos and they think that, hey, if those people work their butt off to look like that, that they might be able to keep that look because I think a lot of times it's like with weight loss shows too, where people make these huge weight losses and they're able to keep the weight off. They think that, oh, that same must go for bodybuilding if they get like really leaned and jacked. But it is not. It is very unhealthy if you try to keep that. And a lot of people, well, not a lot, but I'd say some people do try to keep that look. And they do have shorter careers because it is not healthy for the body, guys or girls, to be able to maintain that leanness. But what has that been like for you when you first realized that, like, hey, all this hard work and determination and just hard prep that I've gone through, this look that I have, it's not going to be sustainable. Was that hard for you? And has it gotten easier for you as your career's gone on to accept that?
Yeah, that is actually really hard. I've always found that it's really hard in the last few weeks going into your prep and going into the show, but it's actually harder leaving the prep and going into your post show, or sorry, off season, because at least when you're grinding through it and you're hungry and you're tired, but you can see results. You can see your body changing, so it's motivating. When you're leaving it, you're seeing your body go the other way. You're seeing your abs become a little more fluffy and hiding. Your glutes aren't as defined. Your hamstring lines are going away. So it's definitely mentally very difficult. I've kind of come to the point where I know you can't stay stage lean like this all the time, and so I've accepted that, you're going to be a bit heavier in the off season. Everyone's off season, I think, is a little bit different how lean they like to stay. Some people like to stay within 15 pounds of the off season. Some people go up to 20, 30 pounds, depending. But I try and look at some of the good things too. Your strength goes up. It's a good time to build on muscle. So you might not be as lean. You got less cardio you got to do. So there's a lot of pros about being into the off season and having a bit more of a thicker body than being super lean. But definitely it is. It takes about, I would say it takes about a month for just mentally and your body to bounce and be back to normal. But, yeah, no, it is difficult because you definitely can't stay lean like this forever. Like, people, I think that, and it's like, no, like, it's those girls you see on the magazines, those guys you see on the magazines, they do those photo shoots, like, within a few weeks of competing usually. They don't look like that 24-hour or 24/7. So, yeah.
I mean, I always say it's just like starting a business where you got to spend money to make money. You got to put on weight if you want to put on muscle. I mean, those two just go hand in hand. And if there's one thing that I could talk about with this podcast, it's just realizing that I mean, everyone. I mean, let's face it. I'm gonna be completely honest. There are those 1% genetic freaks that might be able to keep that look and we've had one of them on the show, and I was like, okay, there's no way. But then she had a photo right next to her when she was like 10 years old, and she had like an 8-pack, and I was like, okay, that's bull. I was like, that's get off my show right now. I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, I don't. But yeah, so there are those 1%ers, but the vast, vast, vast majority of people cannot put that or keep that look, and it's just a healthy thing to, just put that weight back on. And also, I mean, just yeah, it just really, really helps with that. But how long of your journey? So you started in, was it 2016 or 2017 that you started Michaela Fit? What inspired you to do that?
It was about, I think, 2016 I started, maybe end of 2015. It started where I mostly people just started coming to me. I had people ask, like, started with this, like, friends and family members asking me health and fitness questions, and then certain people asking if I would help them. So I just kind of helped a couple people, and then it just sort of grew word of mouth. And then I wanted to make sure I had a kind of a good background before I just started taking clients, because I feel like there's a lot of people who, can write a personal trainer's test and call themselves trainers, and they don't have as much knowledge. And I think a lot of people appreciate having experience, more than reading a textbook. So I always wanted to make sure I felt confident in helping people and feeling like I had enough knowledge before I started really taking on a business. So, yeah, so then it started just kind of word of mouth. I mean, people would start referring me, and then I kind of just started advertising that I was taking clients, and I got a whole bunch, and it's just grown since then. So, and I also something I love to share, and I love to help. I love helping like the high school kids that come and have questions, and so it's been great. I love it.
That's so awesome. And that leads me into the next stereotype that I love to bust, because you probably deal with this all the time still. But I always say it's gotten better the last 5 years due to Instagram. But there are still so many women that have that fear where if they walk into the gym, they do one curl, push up, or pull up, no matter what, just any form of physical exertion that involves weights or body strength, they're just going to put on 50 pounds of muscle overnight. And like I told you before we started recording this podcast, I always say that first ever trillionaire, I'd spend my entire life savings to be able to pick your brain for about a minute just to get your secrets. And I mean, you would just be the biggest commodity of all time. Obviously, that's not true. But did you have that fear when you were getting started? And even if you didn't, I mean, I bet you still hear that all the time now, especially that you have Michaela Fit out there. How do you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, when I started really young. Like, I was about 15, 16 when I started going to the gym. And I was somebody who I was pretty thin. I was a pretty thin girl, but I also had quite some broad features. I had broad shoulders and V taper, and so I was like, okay, I do not want to build any more than this. So I was like, oh, someone said, oh, do shoulder press because it's going to, work your shoulders. I'm like, I ain't doing that. I'm going to get big, ugly shoulders, right? So, I mean, so I can understand where people come from. Now, having said that, I might want my shoulders now a bit bigger than, the average person, depending, but um, it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not that easy, especially as a woman. I mean, if that were the case, the supplement industry wouldn't be a $1 billion industry trying to sell people things to make it happen faster, right? So it's not going to happen that easy. And most women, once we start training and they start to see, then they can, they see that they're not getting blocky. They're actually really liking their definition. They're liking how much stronger they've gotten. And, like, and again, everyone's got different goals. So I try and work with that too.
Yeah, I mean, I always say too, yeah, just step in there and just try it for yourself and see what it's like for you. But adding on to that question, I always say the number one thing that I think impacts women so much more positively than it does guys when it comes to working out is the confidence boost that it gives you. I mean, we've heard so many stories about women who have been able to make, life-changing decisions, or, they've just been inspired to do so many more things just because of that. Because I always say that confidence boost is the one thing that you can take from the gym and have it impact every single aspect of your life. How have you personally used that confidence boost that you get from working out and use it to impact your life?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you look at not just competing, but working out and the changes people make, like, some people I've worked with or just seen or know that have lost like 40, 50, 100 pounds, or some people that have put on 20, 30 pounds of, muscle. I mean, scrawny little kids, you see this amazing physique that they've developed over time, as a competitor, going through what we go through and getting on stage, and not only the diet and the training, but then wearing next to nothing and having somebody judge your body, because that's what it is, right? I mean, if you can do that, just think about what you can do in any other aspect of life, whether you want to go back to school or take a course or start a business. I mean, you really can. It just shows you can really do anything if you put your mind to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so inspiring hearing all the changes that have been able to be made just because of that confidence boost. And that's probably the number one thing that I would advertise if I was a personal trainer, to be like, just that confidence boost. Well, and the fact that most of the time you can eat more than you're even eating right now. It just might be a little bit more healthier. That was one of the big bonuses that I was like, oh, I can eat even more than I'm eating right now and I'll lose weight. Are you kidding me? Yeah, that was the one that really was the hook and sink that really made me choose to do this. But one of the questions that I also love to ask any of the trainers that we have on this podcast, because you always see on Instagram or other forms of social media the transformation pics that the clients go through and just how great and inspiring that is for them, and how, it really just builds their confidence. What is that like for you though, as the trainer, knowing that you have impacted someone's life, and because of you, they have just really made a positive change to their life that is going to impact them for basically the rest of their lives? What is that feeling like for you?
Oh, I think it's so awesome that, they first of all chose me, because there's a lot of people out there that they could hire or talk to. So the fact that they've come to me is, I feel like, such a blessing, first of all, to be able to help these people and make an impact on somebody else by doing what I love. I'm doing is really sharing my knowledge and my passion to them and giving them a blueprint to help them. And a lot of it, like I tell them, is they did it on their own. I can show you certain things and uh, different exercises and give them good diet and nutrition plans. But unless they do the work, you're not going to get any results. So I think the one big thing I like to promote too is that, they did it. I was just able to kind of help guide them, which is really awesome. And I love being able to see the changes that they've made and how happy they are. It is very fulfilling for sure.
I always tell people, I mean, if you can, get a job where you can help out others, because there's nothing better than in the world than having that feeling of knowing that you really made that impact. But two of the questions that I love to ask all the health and fitness guests on as well. For my first question, I mean, there were so many positive things that happened to me when I started working out and getting in shape. But one of the negative things is you're going to get asked to move a lot of people's furniture. You're going to get asked to open a lot of pickle jars or bottled water or anything else that's locked and sealed shut. I'm still at home with my parents for the next couple of months before I move out. So every time they come home with groceries, I basically have to lift the car into the driveway and then carry in the groceries for them, being the good son that I am. But have you found that to be a similar experience where people take one look at you and just assume that you can do favors for them?
Yeah, that or they all want to arm wrestle you.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
I get that quite a bit too.
I've lost a tad bit of my overall look. I mean,
They'll come move this heavy thing, but it's like, no, I'm tired. I just worked out. You haven't worked out yet. You go move it.
oh, yeah, I always tell them, I always say, if you're going to ask me to do something, make sure I get my workout in before I come over, because I don't want to get too sore from lifting your junk that I won't be able to get my workout in. But I always just say, I mean, I've lost a little bit of muscle just because I started my own, I started my 40-hour work week, average thing plus this podcast. So I don't have as much time to work out as I did before. But still, back in the day, I couldn't even go into a bar without getting asked to arm wrestle at least once or twice. And I'm a guy and I'm like, okay, this is just absolutely ridiculous. Like, I don't want to arm wrestle you. So I get what that's like. And I always say, being 6'3", it's a double-edged sword, because I mean, I could have zero muscle at all and people would just be like, oh, tall guy, come help us out, tall guy. So yeah, I mean, It's just it's horrible, horrible for, but I've gotten used to it to the fact where, I mean, all my friends are starting to move out too, so I'm always on call basically during the summer. At least 3 or 4 times I'll get asked to move people's furniture, and being the nice Minnesotan that I am, I'll go and I'll do it for them. But now my favorite question to ask, and my audience favorite question as well. I mean, this is a multi-million-dollar idea, because when it comes to clothes for fit women, I always love to say, I mean, fit guys have their own problems, but fit women, your clothing options can be very limited. And just taking one look at your shoulders and your traps, I was going to say, like dresses and anything that has to do with anything going over the top is going to be a difficulty, because they don't really make things that have really that much of a loop on them. Jeans are another thing that we hear of all the time, where if you have a big lower body and a small waist, jeans are not made for that. What have been some ways that you have found that you're able to compensate for the fact that your clothing options are limited, and the fact that you basically have to have two wardrobes, your prep wardrobe and your off-season wardrobe?
Oh, it's so true. Jeggings, jeggings, best friend, and Lululemon.
Yep.
But yeah, no, it's definitely difficult. Like sometimes I get frustrated when I've got something like a special occasion or something where those dresses really are made, like at Guess, for example. So then, they pull up onto your traps and they pull up and are too short or they're too tight in here. I often have to get like 2 sizes up to fit in here, and then they're looser down here. So yeah, clothes shopping for, average clothes is not the most fun. Like I said, jeggings are my best friend. But yeah, no, it's not as much fun. They gotta make we gotta make a line or something.
It's what I always say. I had two fashion guys come on. I said, we have all these guests on here that are willing to buy it. I mean, I've had over 150 health and fitness guests, and they all would be willing to buy it. I mean, that's easy money right there, but they haven't got on it yet. So now, I mean, again, I got to pitch to them, get on that. But now, before we wrap things up, we got to go to the questionnaire, where I'm going to ask our guest here about a half dozen or so health and fitness related questions, and see how her answers stack up to every single other health and fitness guest that we've had on the podcast. So for the first question, what is a meal that you always need to have in your fridge, or what is an item that you always need to have in your fridge?
I definitely always have to have some sort of protein prepared. So like chicken, fish, steak, or sometimes or protein powder I've got on. So it's a very easy to grab. I think convenience is the best thing. So if you've got something already prepared, meat or protein usually takes the longest to cook. So as long as that's already there, you can grab it, throw some vegetables, make some rice real quick, grab a sweet potato, things like that I find handy. So for me, it's convenience, having stuff prepared. So I always got to have my protein cooked and in the fridge.
I always say chicken and eggs are our most popular answer, but the most shocking one is mustard, because it's mustard, 0 in calories, 0 in fat. So I mean, they douse everything in mustard, but I always say you might want to reevaluate your life if you have to douse mustard. I mean, I'm a team ketchup guy all the way, so I just don't understand that. But again, I'd probably throw up if I had to do that. But just the dedication, again, that just shows on point to that. But what is your favorite body part to train and least favorite body part to train?
I say my least favorites are calves and abs. I don't know. They sting. Calves when you train, they sting. I find my calves, especially, they're lagging. So they're frustrating. I feel like I'm killing them and they're not getting any bigger. So they're probably my most frustrated. Same with my abs, trying to bring them out all the time. My favorite is probably I love training my back.
No, yeah, I mean, I love training back too. It's just one of those things for me. But yeah, I mean, training abs is just another huge thing for me too, because I used to train them so much they got a little bit too pronounced, where it looked like I was a little overweight just because they were just hanging out there so much. It was almost like one of those CrossFit bellies where you look at them and you're like, are they pregnant with like a six pack or something like that? But it's like, no, they're just really, really in shape, and they just have that protruding. But another question in the questionnaire: if all of your followers on Instagram were to meet you in person, what do you think would be the most surprising and shocking thing that they'd find out about you if they met you?
I think maybe that I'm just a small town average person. I mean, that I likes to lift weights. I'm not a lot of my pictures that we post on Instagram, I post a lot of photo shoot pictures and kind of things like that, but I'm no makeup, hair's in a ponytail, uh, runners on, you know, I'm just an average girl that likes to lift weights.
Oh yeah, and that's awesome, and that's why I love having guests come on the show, because just to see what they're really like. Because I think with Instagram too, it kind of does trick people, where they think that everyone's just always this glamorous, just always looking like a 10, basically, with all those photos that they take, and it's like, no. I mean, I've never been at 10 a day in my life, so I don't even know what that feels like. But it's just realizing that, like, hey, they're just normal people, just like you and me. They might just work out a little bit more, and they might have a hell of a lot more commitment when it comes to, just the whole working out aspect. But yeah, they're just normal, average people. That's just one thing that I cannot stress enough on this podcast. But now, if someone were to come up to you and say, Michaela, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding, and everyone would go along with it. What would be one thing that you would like to see changed?
I don't know. I think maybe more respect for the athletes. We don't get as much publicity and things as the other athletes get, the baseball players and the football players, and I feel like we train just as hard.
If
Um,
not harder.
yeah, it's a 24-hour sport. We go just so I think more publicity for us and more respect for the athletes, because I still think a lot of people have a real negative side towards bodybuilding, and we don't get as much respect as the other athletes. So
And that's why I love starting this podcast, just because I felt that, if anything that I could do to just help bring more awareness to it, it would be great. And you sort of lead me perfectly into the next questionnaire question, is that, I mean, obviously you're not the average looking woman. You might get stares when you walk out in public. I mean, a lot of times people just talk about how it's almost kind of like being a celebrity, but you're not getting asked for like autographs. You're not getting asked, but just the amount of attention that you get when you walk out. Has that been difficult for you to adjust to that fact that you are going to get stares and looks if you go out in public?
yeah, it sometimes still kind of surprises me because I was like, well, it's just muscle, you know. But yeah, I do definitely once in a while get the looks and things like that, and I'm like, well, yeah, I guess I am kind of lean right now. But you also don't see it, right? When you look at yourself in the mirror all the time, you don't really realize. So yeah, it was definitely a bit of adjustments for sure. Or having people come up to you and ask you, what do you eat and what do you train? And they're like, what? What do you mean? And then, yeah, it is kind of funny though.
Oh, yeah, that's one thing that I've never, I mean, still to this day, I mean, I still love hearing those stories, just because it's just so fascinating to find out just how, if you're not part of the norm, it's just, for a lot of people, it really just is eye-opening for them, and it really, can take people back a lot. But now, if we were to talk to you a year from today, where would you like to be at in your bodybuilding career? Where would you like to be at in your overall life? What are some goals that you would like to have achieved if we were to talk to you a year from today?
Definitely keeping up with my business and expanding it. I've done a little bit with that with my website now, so I can reach people not just in my town, but I can help online as well. So to continue growing with my business in that respect. As far as bodybuilding, this weekend's the Vancouver Pro Qualifier. So right now, my goal has been to work towards getting my pro status. So I would love to, within the year, come back and talk to you and be doing the pro circuit.
And again, we wish you nothing but the best. Honestly, we think you're going to win just by taking one look at you right now. I mean, she looks fantastic. So we wish you nothing but the best in that. And are there any sponsors or anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Yeah, Magnum is my sponsor, Magnum Nutrition. Fresh and Fit Foods, who's made my food for the last few weeks to help with my prep. And Eric Delore, who's been my coach, who's been awesome. And my family and friends for putting up with me and my prep brain and supporting me this whole time.
And again, you guys, I'll leave a link to all of her stuff down below. I really cannot recommend her enough. Everyone, go and give her a follow. I'll leave a link to Michaela Fit, her website, everything. I mean, and we cannot thank you enough for being on the show. And now, as everyone can see, I thought this would be funny. Her traps are just absolutely ginormous. So could you do like a shrug for us so we can see those traps really pop? That's
Oh,
just
thank you.
that's that's just absolutely ridiculous. Oh, that's just absolutely ridiculous, everyone. That is just insane. Yeah, I just took, yeah, that is, look at those things. Those are, yeah, that's just putting everyone to shame, basically. That's just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, everybody asks me about those, and that's another thing. It's like, well, I don't do too much. They just, I don't know. I used to hate them when I was younger because I always had big, traps and shoulders and couldn't wear cute little, cut off shirts and things. But it seems to work in this industry.
Oh yeah, you found a way to make it work. And again, you guys go and give her a follow. And again, we wish you nothing but the best of luck this weekend. Everyone, I highly, highly recommend that you go and check her out. And thank you again so much for coming on and sharing your story. We really, really appreciate it. And just, you are a great guest.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.